It's a dreary Monday, but we don't have to be, right?
I like that attitude,
We don't
John.
have to be. It's dreary out there. It's a little
Wonderful.
chilly. It's it feels good.
You're going to say how much you like it because it's all gray.
I do.
Oh.
It's a nice day out there, isn't it?
It's not a nice day.
It's a very nice. It's a comforting day.
It's not. There's nothing comforting about
Yes,
today.
there is.
No,
How
there
could you-
isn't.
100%. It's
God's
comforting.
on the throne. That's comforting.
That's very
There's
comforting.
nothing weather-wise comforting about this day.
Nope, that's wrong. There's
Okay.
this beautiful sort of grayish
Paul?
luster that's very nice. It's comfort.
Christy, there's a grayish luster. Did you know
is.
that there was?
No, I didn't.
Well,
Good to know now.
well, thank you. I'm holding on a nice hot cup of coffee that has a little half and half in it.
You guys both had you and I both had a Mallow cup in the last 15 minutes.
did.
I have one for you, Christy.
A Mallow cup is good to start your Monday.
Did you have your
afternoon.
Mallow cup on Friday, Christy?
Yeah, I did.
What did you think?
I love them.
Hey,
Aren't they delicious?
They're so good.
70 calories.
I don't even care.
Totally worthwhile.
Unless I eat 6 of them, which may happen.
I want to thank Rosie Wagner, listener, for providing the Mallow cups for me.
She herself rallied around the Mallow cup.
She did, and she gave me one for me and one for you.
See, her point is your point. Often neglected.
I think so too.
Right.
And I said, we also have a producer. And she was like, oh, well, here's the third.
Yeah, give it up, Rosie. Don't be stingy with the Mallow. Give it over.
So she I didn't get the email that Rosie said she sent, or you said that Rosie sent.
You must
so,
bounce back.
So maybe. So she was saying that she feels like it's undervalued?
Yeah, she made a trip out to Altoona, PA, which is the birthplace of said Mallow Cup.
I thought it began with a B. Or what's the name of the company? Maybe it's the name of the company that makes Mallow cups. Who's that?
Boyer.
Boyer, PA.
Boyer,
It is
PA.
B.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe it's a sub. Let's like Monroeville, to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Right? I mean, Allentown, it's big. And we're living here in it.
Hey, I'm gonna try to go see Billy Joel.
I want to go see Billy
my
Joel too.
husband and I talked about
Excellent.
it today.
Very
Yeah,
good.
Tickets go on sale Friday.
Yeah, good luck with that. Right?
Yeah, I know.
No,
I'm
it'd
gonna
be fun,
try
wouldn't
them.
it?
Yeah,
Heck, it would be.
I really
Okay.
want to do that.
Me too. Good. Can I come with you?
Yeah, the three of us.
No,
I went
my wife.
I went to a movie with you and your wife a couple weeks ago.
Right.
You could go somewhere with me and my husband.
No, we've been to concerts together before.
We have.
Right.
Went to
So-
U2 together.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just say, we went to see U2 maybe 4 years ago when they did the Joshua Tree tour
Heinz Field.
at Heinz Field. And so they sold, it was pretty much a sellout. So there were probably 50,000 people in Heinz Field. I'm sitting there with my husband and my 2 daughters, and I hear, hey, Kath.
Yeah.
I look 4 rows behind me. There's John.
And you were like super excited.
I'm like, how is that possible?
You bought your tickets like months in advance.
I bought my tickets like the day they went on sale because I was so consumed that I would get a good one.
and I
John,
bought mine 3 days before the show.
and he's like 4 rows behind me.
Kath.
That was unjust.
What?
That's like the parable.
What? Did I bring you down?
It's like a parable,
I brought
right?
you down.
Where I'm like the elder sibling, and I'm resentful of the fact that you converted at the last minute. That's what it's like.
U2's prodigal son
Exactly.
tour. Right?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Look, I've been with you guys the whole time, and he shows up at the end and gets good seats.
It's good. Anyway, happy Monday to you. Dreary
too.
as it is. What did I say it was? It was
You said it was a gray luster.
luster. Yeah, very nice.
world.
Okay, let's turn to our news with some trepidation, as we always do. Kath, please give us the top 4 at 4.
On a gray, lustrous Monday, November 15th,
Thumbs up.
2021. Number 1. American journalist Danny Fester, sentenced only days ago to 11 years hard labor in Myanmar, has been freed and is on his way home, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN Bill Richardson said today. Richardson said in a statement that Fester had been handed over to him in Myanmar and would return to the U.S. via Qatar over the next day and a half. Is that an amazing story,
Sure
John?
is.
Fester, the managing editor of the online magazine Frontier Myanmar, was convicted Friday of spreading false or inflammatory information, contacting illegal organizations, and violating visa regulations. I'm reading here from CBS News. Fester's sentence was the harshest punishment yet among the 7 journalists known to have been convicted since the military took power. Richardson said that he negotiated Fester's release during a recent visit to Myanmar when he held face-to-face meetings with General Min Aung Hlaing, the military leader who ousted the elected government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi in February. Thank God. He's on.
And Richardson's showing up and saying,
Yeah.
hey, I mean, he's the highest ranking government official in the world to visit. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Well, yeah. Anyway, that's really wonderful news. Number 2. InfoWars host and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones was found liable today for damages in lawsuits brought by parents of children killed in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting over Jones claims the massacre was a hoax. Judge Barbara Bellis took the rare step, John, of defaulting Jones in the defamation lawsuits for his and his company's failure, quote, to produce critical material information that the plaintiffs needed to prove their claims. The default means the judge found in favor of the parents and will hold a hearing on how much damages he should pay. Reading here from CBS News, lawyers for the parents claim Jones and his companies, including InfoWars and Free Speech Systems, violated court rules by failing to turn over documents to them, including, get ready for this, internal company documents showing how and if he and his company profited financially from talking about the school shooting and other mass shootings. The 2012 school shooting in Newtown, of course, killed 20 first graders and 6 educators. Number 3. Marvin Olasky is out as editor of World magazine. As the longtime editor of World, a Christian news organization that has a website, a bi-weekly magazine, and a set of podcasts, Mr. Olasky has delivered a mix of hard news and watchdog articles about the evangelical realm under a journalistic philosophy he calls, quote, biblical objectivity. Reading here from the New York Times today, they say it involves taking strong stands where the Bible is clear, which has led World to oppose abortion rights and support refugees, he says, and to follow reportable facts where the Bible doesn't provide clear guidance. Mr. Olasky served well starting in 1994 when he became the editor until November 1st when he submitted his resignation.
Wow.
He said he had received an effective vote of no confidence, John, from the board. A lot of issues that percolate today in a lot of Christian organizations where there are people who are interested in being political about their perspective and people who aren't. And Mr. Olasky is not.
Sorry to see Marvin Olasky go. I loved him.
Yep. The New York Times did a great job of talking about all of the big news stories that World broke over the years. And Mr. Olasky closed by saying this: I'm not interested in the project of a conservative opinion magazine. There are lots out there already, and that's not my vision of World. And number 4, I am on a roll, John. It's not a weird animal story. It's just a great animal story. Are you ready?
Sure.
Boone.
Bring it.
A 2-legged special needs hound mix from Butler Township was named the 2021 American Humane Hero Dog on Friday in an awards ceremony in Palm Beach, Florida. He, quote, enjoyed walking the red carpet and wore a brand new formal feathered bow tie, said his owner, Tanya Diablo. And that is your top 4.
Does Boone have a little cart?
I would like to tell you a little bit about Boone, if you'd give me a few
Wheeling
minutes.
down the road there.
Boone got 2 awards on Friday, one for winning the therapy dog category and one for being the overall winner. This year, more than 400 dogs were nominated and 1 million votes were cast. Boone won.
What's
Can I
the
tell you
title
about
again?
Boone? It's the American Humane Hero Dog for 2021.
Nice.
Can I tell you about Boone?
Yeah, sure.
This is going to be a little upsetting if you've got kids in the room. I'm just going to tell you what the Trib says today. But Boone has had his hind legs intentionally and brutally cut off by his former owner when he was only 6 weeks old. Authorities were never able to apprehend his owner, and Boone's chances of surviving were bleak. But Tanya Diablo and her husband Charlie traveled from here to Texas to adopt the dog.
Wow.
The couple had a wheelchair custom built for Boone so he could have mobility, and now he's 4 and he's in excellent health. He serves as the face of Joey's Paw, which is a nonprofit founded in 2017 that has awarded more than 1,000 prosthetics and wheelchairs to handicapped dogs.
That's super cool.
He has a signature wardrobe, which always includes a bow tie. He's been on the Rachel Ray Show, and he has 13,500 followers on Instagram.
Nice. Go Boone.
He's a licensed therapy dog. He works at various schools and hospitals, and every single month he's at Pittsburgh International Airport.
Interesting. I mean, I love to see dogs like that, right? They would not have a chance otherwise.
They certainly wouldn't.
So fabulous.
But he's 4 years old, and he's good.
Rolling down the road.
Have you seen his wheels?
No, I'm not.
They're fancy. And his bow tie. He looks awesome.
We'll take a quick break, and we do come back. Our Monday visit to the White House. First guest of the week, Greg Clugston, joins us from SRN News. Straight ahead. Every Monday, we visit the White House with Greg Clarkson, where Greg is the SRN News White House correspondent. He brings us up to date on the goings-on in and around the nation's capital and across the U.S. and the world. Greg, welcome back. Happy Monday to you.
Thank you, John. Kathy, good afternoon. Happy Monday.
Nice to see you, Greg. I don't know. It seems like it was about 6 years ago we started talking about the infrastructure bill. Should we have a party today that it's actually going to be signed?
Did it get signed?
It's about to be signed right now. The president is out on the South Lawn with about 800 people. It's a big ceremony, a big deal for this administration. There are bipartisan members of Congress in support. There are Republicans on hand, not a lot, but a few. A lot of Democrats, as well as governors, mayors, other officials from across the country that are all signing on in support of this. But the president is just moments away from actually putting his signature on that bill, making it a law.
On the lawn at the White House. I mean, that's got to be a rarity. How often does that happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, about as often as we get infrastructure deals of this size, right?
Right, which, as I said, doesn't happen often.
Exactly. To your point, Kathy. This is one reason why the president did not sign the measure 10 days ago when it was finally approved by the Congress, because lawmakers were then out of town for the next week on recess.
Really?
And so the White House purposefully waited until today with Congress back in session to have these key people, who were responsible for making this happen there to be a part of the celebration. So,
all for a photo op.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a photo op. It's an opportunity, again, for the president and other supporters to explain to the American people what they think this is going to mean for them in terms of improving roads, bridges, and building up the internet access across the country, and all the rest that this bill talks about. Now, there are some Republicans who are concerned that their fellow Republicans who did vote for this, not everyone, of course, did. There are some in the GOP who are concerned that this is going to sort of, grease the path toward having the Democrats and the White House get victory with that other $1.75 trillion package, the Build Back Better package, as they call it, from happening. And so there are concerns within the GOP that even though these were separate bills, one might lead to the other.
I see.
Right. The Ride Home streaming live on YouTube. You can watch Greg Clugston. He's with us on Zoom. You can find us on YouTube at The Word Pittsburgh and check out the show. Okay, so it's good for the president because he sure needed a win. Things are looking really bad on the inflation front, Greg.
Yeah, this is sort of a mixed day for the White House and for the president personally these days, not just today, but especially perhaps today because of this bill signing ceremony. And that's for that very reason. He's got something to celebrate today, but at the same time, inflation is an ongoing concern. And his poll numbers have been on a downward trajectory. We've talked about that the last
really
couple
low,
of weeks.
yeah.
Those things are tied together in terms of inflation, how Americans are feeling about their personal, economy, their personal, checkbooks and bank accounts and all the rest. And with the rising inflation, and the other thing about the inflation too is that the White House, senior administration officials, they don't trumpet this, but they have acknowledged that the inflationary pressures have lasted longer than first anticipated. And to be honest, they don't see any real improvement probably until calendar year 2022. So that begs the question, what is the White House? What can the president even do in the short term to make an immediate impact on this? And while the president certainly has a lot of levers he can push and pull, and obviously signing a bill like this is something that will help in the longer term, there still are some open questions as to what can be done in the short term.
I see. So, Greg, the Christmas break happens when? I mean, here we are mid-November. Is there another 2 to 3 weeks in session?
Yeah, and it's sort of stop and start because we've got Thanksgiving next week. So the lawmakers are back in D.C. this week. They're off all of next week for their Thanksgiving recess, and then they are back the week after that. And then we've got another one of those crunch periods coming up as we talk about every year. We talked about them just a couple of months ago because they passed these temporary spending measures to keep the budget going. But there's also the debt ceiling limit issue that's going to be coming up again in the early days of December. So it's going to be a crunch time, as it often is between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
It's always something.
Greg Clugston with us, SRN News White House correspondent. Okay, let's move to the president speaking with the Prime Minister of China. So it's not going to be a face-to-face thing. It's going to be, what, the best of Zoom?
Pretty much, yeah, just like we're doing here, talking to each other on a video call.
Yeah.
By the way, it is official. Just moments ago, the president signed the infrastructure bill, so it is official as of right now.
All right.
And
I'm glad we could celebrate this moment together, Greg.
Pop the champagne.
Yeah,
there we go.
I knew you were waiting for that to happen. So, and the White House was courteous enough to schedule the event during our conversation.
Fabulous.
this
Good.
afternoon.
We like
They're always so amenable to what we need. It's
Right.
wonderful.
So coming up later tonight, and this is going to be a call that the White House officials say could be a couple or 3 hours long.
Really?
Yeah, this is going to be the first time that these two men will be meeting since President Biden took office. These are leaders who have known each other for years. Back when Joe Biden was vice president, he spent a lot of time visiting with and even traveling in some cases with Xi Jinping. But now here they are, all these years later, and they're each the president of their nation. U.S. and Chinese relations are not great right now on a lot of levels, whether it's trade, whether it has to deal with tariffs. Taiwan is a concern, aggressive Chinese actions toward Taiwan, especially in recent weeks. There is a lot to talk about on that agenda, and that's one reason why they think it could be a couple of hours on the call tonight. Of course, you've got the translation that also has to happen for the language. That also adds to the time of the call.
I see. So, Greg, any insight on what the call itself, the visual will look like? I mean, there you are in front of a camera. We're in front of a camera. Is it pretty much the same? I'm sure on both sides there'll be staff around, right? Translators, as you said, but it won't just be a singular solo call. There's a lot going on
They're
there.
probably not going to be streaming on YouTube.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, they won't be streaming, unfortunately. There would be a lot of reporters that would be tuned into that, believe me.
But we'll see something at some point, right?
Well, there is going to be reporters in the pool today. The press pool today will have some immediate. So we may get some images to sort of answer that exact question that you're asking, John, as to exactly what does the video call look like. We'll have to wait and see if we get those exact details. But you're right. There obviously are aides and associates for each of these political leaders, on the sidelines, around the table, behind the camera and all that. There's a lot of preparation that goes into these events. Obviously, these events are probably more fruitful in some sense if they are face-to-face, but he has not left China for some time. And so we're told by officials here that President Biden believes that even though U.S.-Chinese relations are problematic right now on a lot of different levels, this president believes that there is value in still trying to strike out common ground. The White House has not made any has not been shy, I should say, about saying that we want to be very competitive with China, but they also say we want to be intensely diplomatic with China and to focus on areas of common agreement as well. So it's a tricky path, and there will be a lot to talk about. They can only get so far, even in a couple of hours tonight, but it'll perhaps set the groundwork for future conversations.
It's fascinating, really is.
Yeah, Greg. So. This era, when we're a week out from Thanksgiving, we're going to be pretty much away for 4 days or so, Thanksgiving wise. Then we've got Christmas in 3 weeks. Does anything really happen on Capitol Hill during that time?
Well, not
Give me the honest
days
truth.
when Congress is in recess. Obviously, no. It's just everybody's off on a break, just like we often will get a chance to visit with family and friends over Thanksgiving, hopefully. But as I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, they have a series of deadlines on some important issues, budget, the debt ceiling, those kinds of things that are set to expire in early December.
So they've got to do something.
Exactly. And we've been through this. We've been through this before. We've talked about it for years here on your program about, it's just like, cramming for a test, in college the night before and sort of procrastinating and waiting to the last minute right before the deadline, turning that term paper in. And that's what is happening again with members of Congress. And so there will be a flurry of activity that goes forward. And then, of course, not just those deadlines that are going on, but you've got this Build Back Better, larger climate, education, healthcare package that's approaching $2 trillion. That is a more partisan issue. It's a partisan bill that Democrats are hoping to get done. That may not get done before Christmas or New Year's, and that could bleed into January. It's possible it could get done before then, but that's also happening. So there's a lot on the plate for lawmakers as they come and go between Washington and their home districts.
Very good. Well, speaking of a lot on the plate, so one of President Trump's associates, confidants, Steve Bannon, is facing some trials for contempt charges. Please talk to us about that.
Right. He had received a subpoena from the January 6th House committee that is looking into the events of January 6th at the U.S. Capitol and that attack. And he did not respond to that subpoena. And so he surrendered, Steve Bannon did this morning, to FBI agents outside his home, did make a court appearance here in Washington earlier today. And then afterwards, he, along with his attorney, spoke to the press for a few minutes. Bannon was very defiant. He said that he is going to be fighting these contempt charges and any charges that are filed against him related to January 6th. He referred to the Biden administration as the Biden regime and was accusing that the president directed the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, to go after Bannon, perhaps specifically. That's a charge that was leveled by Bannon. So it was very combative, and we haven't heard the last of this. And then, of course, he's just one of many Trump associates and people from inside the Trump White House and campaign inner circles that have been called to provide testimony and documents as this committee is looking into the situation involving January 6th.
There's always some excitement, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
All right, last question for you, Greg.
Yeah,
news comes from your hometown newspaper, the Washington Post. I don't mean the one in Seattle, the Washington Post.
Sure.
That perhaps you should stop sucking in your stomach all the time. And by you, I mean
not you.
All of us. It could be bad for our health. Do you suck in your stomach, and is this something you're concerned about,
That's
Greg?
pretty intimate. I mean, to ask.
I feel it. Look, we've known
He's a
Greg a lot.
newsman.
Look, we've just shared the infrastructure
He's a
bill
national
signing.
newsman. They're talking about sucking in his
That's
stomach.
why he comes onto the ride home.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, Kathy's right to a certain degree, but John has a point as well, I have
Thank
to say.
you. I'm just trying to protect you,
Don't
Greg.
try to walk the
that
middle line
Is
here.
that a political answer there or
No,
what,
it's
right?
very good. We appreciate
No, I mean,
it.
I feel like we know each other pretty well. Although that is pretty personal, but let's be honest. I'm not afraid to let the guard down. Have I sucked my stomach in from
Yes.
time to time?
Yes.
Sure,
Yes.
I have.
Yes, you
Sure.
have.
Oh, great. I thought that was supposed to be good for us.
Nope.
It was supposed to be good for your back, right? To always be in. Why all of a sudden are we finding out this is a negative?
Right. Well, Greg's going
It's
to
like
leave
butter
us.
and margarine.
If
It's
Greg
like,
would stick around, we may have the answer to that. But Greg, I'm
All right.
sorry you have to read that on your own at some point.
I will. Thanks
Yeah,
for the
please.
tip.
Yeah.
try to squeeze that into your early evening reading.
Yes, thank you. You're looking good, Greg. Keep
right.
it going. Don't hurt
Thanks,
yourself.
Bye, Greg.
Yeah, okay. So Cass says stop sucking in your stomach all the time.
Seriously, it's
It
like
could
a
be
health
bad
alert.
for your health.
What?
That's next. I don't know. So if you just tuned into our last segment, you see we ask a national newsman about whether or not he sucks in his stomach.
I think it's a vital question even for today's program based on what we read in the Washington Post. I want to know.
It's extremely intimate, but it is kind of
extremely
it's
intimate.
extremely
It's
intimate.
not extremely intimate.
Do you walk
this
up
is
this-
a directive that we've gotten from health professionals for the last I don't know how long. You should always walk. In fact, you should sit with your stomach muscles in. It's better for your back, better for your posture.
All right. Well, Heather Jeffcoat, she is a physical therapist in the Washington, D.C. area. Heather Jeffcoat. She also takes a spin class. And then
Wait. She's a what?
She's a physical therapist.
Okay.
What did you think I said?
I was thinking, wait, in my head, I thought she's a journalist because she wrote the articles. No, she's just a physical therapist who is quoted.
Right. So she's a therapist, and she also takes a spin class, and then next to her spin class is a Starbucks. She
Okay.
said, so I'm in the Starbucks, and I see, these well-coiffed people wearing their workout, their
Attire.
whatever they wear, their capri pants and their sports bra and their little,
Sure.
shorts and whatnot. And she said, as a physical therapist, I look at people. I'm just naturally an observant person, and I see everyone sucking in their stomach. And then she's like thinking, wait a second, so from your training, what does that say about what you're seeing? And what she's discovered is that continually doing that approach to the beauty standard of a flat stomach could have some physical effects, which involve the posture, bowel movements, urination, and your pelvic bone itself.
Well, what are we getting into now?
That's exactly why I'm saying why you're bringing this up,
Well,
because it
I
seems
didn't
very
know
personal.
it had such far-reaching implications.
So then, she starts to investigate. She's talking to other people. Sarah Huang, an assistant professor of physical medicine and rehabilitation at Northwestern University's School of Medicine, she says those muscles are trained to always be activated. It can affect the entire core. She's also the director of women's health and rehab. And she said, so if you're walking around tensing those muscles on a regular basis, when they're just called on, they're supposed to be, they're designed to be called on in situations other than actively all the time, that it could affect deeper than what the physical therapist is saying. It could cause the pelvic floor to potentially become overwhelmed, which could have consequences in the pelvic organ prolapse. Don't even ask me what that is.
Sounds very bad.
So the thrust of it all, and I say that with quotes around it, is they're saying essentially, would everybody just relax and let it all hang out?
Okay, I
don't know. And that seems to be
Look,
very
I gotta
intimate
tell
for an
you,
afternoon show.
I got to tell you. I started seeing a physical therapist when I hurt my back the first time in college.
Yeah. And did they say? tighten
Of
it?
course. They said that you should always listen when I'm sitting here,
Yeah. You're tight?
always. Because that's what I was taught is that to support your back,
Really?
that's what you have to do with your core.
I'm sitting next to you eating a bag of chips.
And I'm working really hard over here, you guys.
Well, you look good.
Thanks. But it's not about looking good. It's supposed to be that it supports your back. If you have a back problem,
Right.
you want to find out whatever you can
Well,
do to not have that happen
Isn't
again.
that like what crunches are for and sit-ups and whatnot, right? That
yeah, but
core.
this happens all the time. I don't trust.
Physical therapist.
Oh, trust
Or
the
the entire
information
medical
that's coming
community.
out about this sort of thing. They're going to tell
No
me
one.
next that margarine's
I don't
good
trust
for
anybody.
me. Margarine's good for me.
That's what it's here on the right.
Margarine's terrible, isn't it?
buddy of mine went to a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher said, we think your boy may be ADHD. He's always fidgeting around. He's, there's a lot of, lack of attention and whatnot. And my buddy said, well, I don't want to agree with you too much here. I think more than anything, my kid may need a wrench or a screwdriver in his hand. And that was kind of like
to do something.
Yeah, that was sort of like the family joke, right? I mean, the kid's fidgety because he needs something in his hands to do some work. And I like that story because it, kind of spoken like a real father, a guy who is handy himself with perhaps a wrench or a screwdriver. Well, Tony Woodleaf is back with us. Tony, he lives in North Carolina. He's got a terrific website that we follow along, and we'll talk about that as well. He's also a writer who's appeared in the Wall Street Journal and the London Times and Comment. But intentional fatherhood, Tony, I mean, I'm glad with 3 sons, you can talk about this. I think probably in some ways we're kindred spirits. We wish we were the guy with the wrench or the screwdriver or all that stuff, but that's not necessarily our skill set, but it's still important, yeah?
That's right. Thanks for having me on, Jen. It is. I think we see more and more boys struggling in school because they're expected to fit there like little cogs in the machine and not move, be quiet, be still, don't speak your mind, and they're dropping out.
So if kids are dropping out, what does that does that signify that they're disengaged, they're disinterested, or is it because they don't feel like they fit into this, I don't know, the box of
the mold of a boy?
Yeah, the academic mold.
Well, it's a good question, Kathy. I mean, of course, every child is different. They have different reasons. I know from my own sons who are intelligent young men. You wouldn't always know that from their decisions, but trust me, I know there's some intelligence in there. They're bored, and they don't feel like this system is for them in any way. It's like it's designed to instill compliance, and they're not wired that way. So they don't want anything to do with it. And I talked to my 17-year-old he's a little entrepreneur. He's got a couple of side businesses. He's very good with his hands, very smart. And we talked about maybe he just takes the GED and gets out of high school early and, enrolls in community college or something. And I didn't realize that in my state of North Carolina, they changed the rules. So you have to be 18 years old to do that. You can't be a 16-year-old the way you could when I was a kid and just, prove that you know enough and get out of there. And I view that as just sort of an example of where I think the school system needs kids to be, the behinds in seats, because that perpetuates the myth that they're doing something productive in there.
Right. So, Tony, talk to us about your own growing up as a boy and, centered now with your work on intentional fathering. Was your dad an intentional fathering kind of guy?
No, you couldn't say that. He left when I was quite young. For a variety of reasons. He was very young himself. He and my mother had me when they were teenagers and kind of bounced around in life, and we didn't get reconnected until much later. But with that said, I can tell you that right now that man is downstairs in my house taking care of my 4-year-old twins, playing with them all day long, even though they've worn him out. So the message I see in that is it doesn't matter how much you've stumbled as a father, the door is always open as long as you're breathing.
That's
wow.
Excellent. Okay, so then without a father who's sort of like, there by your side day to day, how did you learn the skill, the art, the intensity of what it is to be an intentional father, to raise sons?
Well, some people might say I never did. I tried to pay a lot of attention to men I admire. And I was raised for most of my childhood by a stepfather who was very harsh disciplinarian. He's a Green Beret, Special Forces in Vietnam, twice decorated in combat, but also kind of hard to live with. But he toughened me up in a lot of ways. And I think you only realize in retrospect as you get older that the men in your life, even though probably most of them were flawed, as men are, they still had a purpose in your life. And you can still see the path you're on and see the best in them in the best choices you make. And I've come to realize that probably later than I should. And I've gradually developed gratitude towards men that I was too harsh and unforgiving towards for most of my own life.
Is that because you hadn't experienced what they had experienced, Tony? And so you were, judging them based on some ideal you'd created?
Yeah, Kathy, that's a good question. I think that's probably part of it. And then having made every possible mistake as a father myself, you learn a little grace for other people. One thing I've realized is almost every kind of life choice that I've made fun of back when I was younger and I thought I knew everything, I've now at this point stumbled into in one way or another. And so I realized going forward, I only want to make fun of billionaires. So maybe a dad will turn me into one of them.
Touche. That's good. All right, Tony. So you told us you got a 17-year-old son, and you have sons who are 4-year-old twins. That's a huge gap.
Oh, well, I have 6 sons. I have my oldest is a United States Marine. He's 21. I have a 19-year-old, 17, 14-year-old, and then 4-year-old twins. And the gap is because one of the terrible mistakes I made when I was younger was I ruined my first marriage, and it ended in divorce. And then I had to, with my ex-wife, do our best to raise our first 4 sons, 4 sons as best we could, apart. And then I remarried. I had the very, very good fortune, the blessing to meet a woman who could put up with me. And by that point, I'd changed quite a bit. And so I had 2 more children with her. And thankfully, they all get along great. The older brothers are like, the best big brothers you'd ever want to have. So the 4-year-olds are in heaven with all these big boys to wrestle.
Mm-hmm. Tony Woodleaf is with us. His short fiction has appeared in Image, Ruminate, St. Catherine Review, and Dappled Things, while his essays about parenthood and faith have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Comment, and the London Times. We've known Tony for a couple years. And, Tony, one of the things I've appreciated about you, it might have been you that kind of got me along the path of thinking about raising kids as us growing up at the same time. Now, I didn't have kids particularly young. I was 29 when I had my first child, so it wasn't like I was 16. But in looking at the process, one of my girls is out of college and one is in college. I look back at it and I realized that while I was raising them, I was really growing up myself. And so that's something that can kind of cause me to be hard on myself, that I didn't recognize things sooner. On the other hand, it can kind of cause me to give myself a little bit of a break because I was immature when I started.
No perfect parent.
How do you look at that, Tony?
Oh, Kathy, I think that's, hard-won wisdom right there. I mean, the number of sleepless nights when I ponder, as we all want to do, I ponder all my mistakes and the harm I've done to my children through my own mistakes, and I just try to remember. Jordan Peterson has this great line where he says you should treat yourself the way you would treat a friend. You should give yourself the advice you would give a friend. And so I try to do that. I would encourage a friend to have grace for his failings as long as he's learning from them. And one thing I think I've learned is that for all parents, men, women, mothers, fathers, it's the very striving that is evidence that you're doing good enough. The fact that you worry that you're not and that you're trying to do better, that's all your child needs. Just like your child needs to know that he or she is good enough in your eyes, you have to know that you are good enough in your Father's eyes, your Heavenly Father, and He's given you all the tools that you need. Your good works are prepared beforehand, as it says in Ephesians. You just have to walk in them, and that, I think, especially has to include our children.
Tony, we've got a friend here who worked at the station for a number of years, and he became a first-time father while he was working with us. And we made some, hey, when your baby arrives, and this is what's going to change. And he was like, he nodded his head, and he's like, yeah, I got this. I'm okay. We're going to just continue to live our life as we've always done, and really just move forward from there.
Yeah, they're going to take a road trip, right? They were going to take like some 11-hour road trip or something, Tony, like when the kid was 2 weeks old. And John and I thought,
that's not going to happen.
How do you tell somebody that that's not going to happen?
Yeah, and I think that's it. How do you tell someone? And for all of us, we wish we knew what we knew was coming, but you can't really tell that to anybody. You got to go through it yourself and make your own mistakes and your own screw ups and your own victories, and all that happens. But I'm sure because you're so intentional, especially with 6 boys, people come to you for advice. And is there that one piece of wisdom, other than what you're saying here, which is excellent, about being available and being there and forgiving yourself in the moment, right? But there are so many people who want to be good parents, and there's a lot of books about it, but I wish there was sort of like, the ultimate manual for the excellent mother and father that we all would embrace as a society, and we're all on the same page.
The problem is it's not math.
No.
That's right. Oh, I wish. I mean, for me, the advice I got that just pierced my heart, and maybe it was just because it's for me, and maybe other people don't need it, but I think for a lot of fathers, we have to remember that our children, they're wired really tightly to us. They know when we don't approve, and we don't have to elaborate on all the ways we don't approve when they failed, because they already know. That doesn't mean we don't have consequences. They sin, they break a rule, but it took me too long to realize that what my children crave is knowing that they're good enough. And so I realized that most of my words should be legitimate praise, not, oh, you're a hero because you got your homework done on time, but legitimate praise. Hey, you know what? You worked really hard on your homework, and I know you don't like math. Just things like that. And I can tell you, it has transformed my relationships with my older sons, having been overly critical, trying to make them be perfect, and then realizing, I just need to turn that part of myself off. And it really changed how we relate to each other. And I just, that, if nothing else, if I could get every father to remember that your criticism is kind of already wired in, they already know, and just focus on reinforcing what they're doing that's good. That's what they desperately want to hear, especially from their fathers.
That's fabulous. Tony, thanks an awful lot. Really, it's always good to have you.
Always
Listen,
appreciate
if
when
people
you're
want to
here,
find more about you, give them where you are.
Well, you can go to my website. It's just Tony Woodlief, WOODLIEF.com, or intentionalfathering.com, which has been on a bit of a hiatus because I was working on another project, but hope to get it going again with more new material that people can look at.
Fabulous. Legitimate praise for your son, your daughter, Tony Woodlief. Look for him online, Tony Woodlief, WOODLIEF. Take a quick break, come back. It's the Monday edition. Saw something about the Human Library. Check this out. The Human Library is an educational nonprofit that organizes temporary, and in quotes, libraries, in quotes, around the world where you can borrow a person instead of a book. Founded in Copenhagen in 2000 by Ronnie Abergale, the idea is to encourage people with very different perspectives, backgrounds, beliefs, or experiences to have a safe place to talk openly and honestly so that others may better understand them. Loan periods from the Human Library are a maximum of 30 minutes.
Okay, so I could go into the library and I could borrow you, and then you and I could sit down and we could talk. And,
Right.
But I have to return you in 30 minutes.
Right. 30-minute conversation. So they give examples. A feminist meets with a Muslim woman in a hijab and asks if she wears it by choice or compulsion. A climate change activist meets with someone who thinks global warming is a hoax.
Or how about a coal miner?
Yeah. So
That's really interesting.
you sit, again,
Wouldn't that be awkward? It'd be so good. It'd be so healthy.
Well-
oh, it'd be super awkward.
no, I don't, maybe it wouldn't be awkward because the
No,
person who's
no.
acting is the...
It wouldn't be open-minded. It wouldn't be difficult for you because you're open. You're an open-minded person.
Well, you wouldn't do it unless you were open-minded, don't you think? Unless you were
Yeah, I guess that's a good
compelled
point. I
to
guess
do
that's
it.
a good point.
Right? I mean, I really want to understand. I mean, if your mind's made up, you're not going to go to the library and
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
let me talk to, right?
But the people who need it the most are those people.
We all need it.
We all need it. You're
I
right.
mean, we're all a hot mess today, are we not? Right? So Copenhagen, now apparently, it runs the gamut. The Human Library. You can find it online, of course. If you just Google in the Human Library, they're on all the platforms, of course, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. But look at the Human Library if you want a different perspectives, something you don't. I just don't get it.
Right.
Why are people doing this? This doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. Who would you
Can we
talk
do
to?
it? Could we do it online? Who would I talk to? You know
Yeah.
who I'd talk to?
Who?
Nancy Pelosi.
Really?
Yeah.
I would talk to some like Antifa guy.
Okay.
What is going
Yeah.
through your mind?
Just tell me about this.
I mean, I don't know, but then I'm afraid, someone, what
You
do
think Nancy? You think Nancy could be borrowed for 30?
No, probably not.
Yeah, she probably.
No,
She's
no.
busy.
Nancy Pelosi,
She-
really.
Yeah.
Why would that?
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Would be. If there was true honesty and
Yeah.
empathy and compassion.
Why'd you carry that big gavel down the street like that? Yesterday was one of those days that you wake up in the morning thinking it's going to be one thing. And then by the time the Steeler game is over, you realize that you were completely incorrect.
Well, that's why people like sports.
There's nothing to like about sports yesterday. First of all, the Pens played two terrible games. But the Steelers yesterday, that was some kind of special torture that we suffered by watching that.
You know what? I was so busy yesterday afternoon. I thank my lucky stars. I did not waste the entirety of those hours. I missed it all.
You missed it.
I'm so grateful. I really am so grateful.
I'm actually a little angry about it because
No, I feel good about
you know how when you're going through something difficult, you want somebody to share it.
Mm-hmm.
So my pain cannot be lessened because you don't understand it with me.
I had to
Christine,
laugh.
did you watch it?
I watched most of it.
Most of it. Wait,
Yeah.
you bailed at
What's
the
that
last
mean,
minute?
most of
No, I didn't bail at the last minute. I left at halftime.
Okay.
And then we were down. I was with my family. We were down the waterfront, and I was watching on my phone
Yeah.
as we were walking down the waterfront.
Did that make it more easy to bear?
Oh,
They had like a nice little Christmas thing going on down there, so it kind of did.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, great.
Oh, I felt bad for you because last night,
Yeah.
it was like late. It was like 10 o'clock or something. You texted me and I was talking about the show. And then you said the last thing you said was, hey, don't tell me anything about the Steeler game. I haven't watched it yet. I'm about to watch it. And I was like,
It's like someone's teetering at the edge of a precipice, right? And you want to save
I
them.
wanted to say, don't go there, but I couldn't because you told me not
Yeah,
to. So
yeah.
you had to suffer through that.
Oh my gosh!
I watched.
Listen, it was a horror show. Let me.
Of course it was.
I need to just vent a little bit. Okay. First of all, our defense, our vaunted defense, let the Detroit Lions at some point in the third quarter, they had racked up like 239 rushing yards.
That's a good team.
Okay, I don't even know what the final stats were because I can't bear to look at them.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. Okay, that happened. Okay, the defense looked horrible. The offense was like a junior high unit. I mean, we obviously we don't have Juju. We didn't have Claypool. Mason Rudolph was terrible, and I know he's a backup, and I feel really sorry for him, and that's really a difficult position to be put in. But it was horrible. We had first and goal inside the 6-yard line, and we passed 3 times. It was unthinkable. Why do we have Najee Harris if we can't run him in a situation like that? And the final insult of J.J. Watt being hurt, and fortunately, I heard before, I haven't looked up particularly since before the show started, but it doesn't sound like it's too bad. Okay, good. That was the final thing.
JJ or TJ?
What did I say, JJ?
Yeah.
TJ.
Yeah.
He's my neighbor.
I mean, JJ, he's there because TJ.
JJ has already peaked in his career. That's not a criticism. It was an absolutely fantastic career.
Yeah.
But let me just also indicate that the Freiermuth fumble at the end, after we had 6, this was the sixth, do you hear me? Possession of overtime. How have you ever seen a game where there were 6 possessions of overtime? Other than Penn State, what was that, Iowa? Penn State, Iowa?
Well, that's a crazy set of rules, though, too.
Right, this is a professional football game.
Yeah.
6 possessions. Yeah. When Freiermuth fumbled at the end, I thought...
Listen, again,
I hope everyone out there is experiencing this angst along with me since John can't.
Well, no, you just kind of go, I'm so grateful that I didn't have to suffer long. That's all. I love the Steelers.
Terrible.
And, of course, games are going to come this way, like especially in this, rebuilding phase. The good news is
Why are we? I don't even.
Mason Rudolph, you got to go, any lingering questions, you
Yes.
go.
Okay, well, so we have that sorted out.
Right.
Okay, he's not the guy. Christy,
Clearly.
did you see the end?
Yeah,
How about that?
it was horrible.
Wasn't it horrible?
But it was made better by the red and green lights that she was surrounded by.
That's true. And there was Frosty the Snowman.
Right.
You could take a picture with Buddy the Elf. It was all fun and
See,
games.
were you going to have a meal? Did you have a meal at the waterfront?
No, just shopping.
Okay.
My husband was asleep, dead asleep. He'd been asleep for hours in our bed upstairs on the 3rd floor of our house. I was on the 1st floor, and I yelled so loudly when Freiermuth fumbled that ball that he woke up and ran downstairs thinking I was injured.
He loves you.
And I had to tell him,
No.
I'm sorry, honey.
Right.
It's just the stupid game.
Look, it's a game. Just a game.
Oh, did I mention the special teams were bad?
Yep.
I didn't.
How about the coaching?
Special teams were terrible. I have no idea what happened with the coaching. Why I'm not sure what happened with the timeouts at the end. I don't. Anyway, so good for you, John. Good for you. Let's just stop talking about it. Right. At 5:50, we're going to talk about our picks.
Oh, right.
That we made on Friday.
Okay.
But coming up next, our good friend Alan Noble with us. Boy, what does it mean to live in this world that seems inhumane a lot of the time?
It is.
We'll talk about it next. Yesterday was inhumane. The milieu in which man lives is no longer his. He must adapt himself as though the world were new to a universe for which he wasn't created. He was made to go 6 kilometers an hour. He goes 1,000. He was made to eat when he was hungry and sleep when he's sleepy. Instead, he obeys a clock. He was made to have contact with living things, and he lives in a world of stone. He was created with a certain essential unity, and he's fragmented by all the forces of the modern world. Jacques Ellul.
Jacques Ellul. That is from Alan Noble's newest work, You Are Not Your Own, Belonging to God in an Inhumane World. Alan Noble, Associate Professor of English at Oklahoma Baptist University. Alan, welcome to the show. That is a very hard uphill battle to fight, is it not?
It is. Thankfully, we have Jacques Ellul's beautiful language to help us.
Yeah. The beauty of it does help. But the reality of it is still rough. I mean, so many times I wake up in the morning and I think, this is going to be hard.
This day.
Yeah. This is going to be hard. And I think, and it's not because I'm suffering a major grief or sadness in my life right at this point. It's just that it's a lot to manage.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And I find myself, even though I wrote this book about this problem, I find myself even just this weekend saying something to the effect of, I just need to get through the day. And that's part of the motivation behind this book, was finding myself saying things like that, or hearing it from friends, hearing it from students, other people I knew. This constant refrain, which indicates that there's something about the basic structure of our lives that is deeply disordered, so that we feel like we just have to get through time, that there's not an actual pleasure or joy in time itself, but it's something we suffer through.
Right. Okay. So, Ellen, this is not necessarily a malady of modern man. Although, I mean, probably other people, the billions of people who have gone before us, they suffered their own horror and indignity of what it is to live moment to moment.
Sure.
But in the modern world, we have, advertising and, the modern conveniences that are the Band-Aid that sort of take care of those second-to-second indignities. But then, of course, we all realize in man's inhumanity and just what it is, the nature of being alive, that life itself is brutal, right? And so we've just got a brief reprieve, but it's not the truth of the reality of what it is to be alive.
So the modern world is a lot more efficient at helping us cope with and adapt to an environment that is inhuman, right? And in some ways that's nice, because when we say to ourselves, I just need to get through the day, well, I have a ready access to caffeine to help me get through the day. That historically was not the case, right?
Right.
I have access to medications to stabilize my mood. I have access to entertainment to calm me down and relax me, and all these resources. And I'm not saying that I just had a cup of coffee, so I'm not saying that any of them are inherently bad. But what I am saying is that that's different historically. In what it can do is it can enable us to not deal with the deeper maladies, the deeper sickness, because it is so cheap and easy to just put up with it.
Sure. So if we're overwhelmed with technology, okay, so for example, Alan, my husband and I were in Scranton, PA, which is in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania, about a month ago. And it's a really depressed area because it had as its center coal mining and railroading for so
that's
long.
Dunder Mifflin.
It is Dunder Mifflin, if you are an Office fan. And so being there and kind of like looking, you can't ignore the historical sweep of what happened in the town, because so much of it is railroad, so much of it is coal mine, and we, of course, know what happened to those industries. And you're surrounded by a sense of
Wreckage.
decline, hopelessness. And I think of my husband and I, when we were there, we were just talking about how many people were put out of work, how many people felt like the essence of their work that they'd committed themselves to, the sector of the economy that they had lived in and supported for all those years was almost instantaneously not wanted. Instantaneously not needed, and how inhumane that must have been. And so the city itself, you feel that when you're there. There's just a sense of that. And I think, okay, so how do you get past something like that? How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, boy, that's heavy. There's a crisis of meaning, and one way that manifests is this sense that our work is meaningless. And, you can feel that in a number of ways, but one way is that if you devote your life to learning a trade, a skill, to working for a company, and then that company very quickly makes the decision that you are, exposable, and your services are no longer needed, you can feel like, well, what am I doing? What is the point of this? And this is part of, so one of the things I talk about in the book is that the power of efficiency, the role, and this is what I'm getting from Jackie Newell, the role of technique and efficiency. So, for example, when technology changes and we no longer need the railroad as much as in the past, or coal mining as in the past, all of a sudden, you're out of work. And so what that can do is it can give you a sense of a loss of dignity, that your life isn't doing much. And a despair can follow from that. And, one of the things I talk about is, the recent study of the deaths of despair. which are predominantly men who are middle-aged, who don't have a college education, and they might experience something like getting laid off, and then they feel like, I have no purpose in society. I don't belong anywhere. And that's when addiction and mind, soul-numbing entertainment can fill a void.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Alan, let's get then to one of the cruxes of your book, which is that we hear that story about coal miners, or here in Pittsburgh, what happened to the steel industry, the collapse of the steel industry, and now Pittsburgh's a tech hub, which of course means that Pittsburgh is filled with different types of people now, right, than it was in 1960 when the steel industry was still peaking. But without any type of outside direction, we also feel as individuals that we're on our own, that we're individuals, right? This is what our secular society preaches to us, is that you can make your own choices. This is
right.
Your life is up to you, and you get to choose.
Yeah.
If you want to have sex with somebody right now, you can. If you want to change your gender, you can. If you want to quit your job and go find something else, you can. And so if you want to leave your church, if you never want to go back, you don't have to. So we're kind of overwhelmed, maybe, would you say, by all of our options?
Absolutely, yeah. It's crushing, and you're right that it is related to that same idea of you can sleep with whoever you want, but also if you're unemployed because you've taken your industry away, if you don't want to be unemployed, you have the freedom to go and move and find a job. But of course that means leaving your family and leaving maybe where you and your people have lived for 100 years or something like this. But if you think about people as just radically autonomous, then you really have no obligation to care for them and their families in a specific place. You can just suggest that they just get up and move and find a new job. So it is overwhelming, and sometimes when we are overwhelmed, what we can do is we can suffer. There are just so many things that I could do that I don't know that I can do anything, and that's when we can just want to just lie in bed and not get up.
So then, Alan, I mean, if in this modern world, or even in the ancient world, if everything means nothing, then where does God fit in this? Because then does God become just another, sort of panacea of celebrity culture or the internet, just one more item on the menu?
Yeah, it can. He can, absolutely. And one inspiration for this book is that very concern, that even among evangelicals, even among Christians, we can treat God as another coping mechanism. So come to my church, and we will help your kids grow up to be, have good character and to be hard workers,
right.
And we will give you a sense of community. But fundamentally, yeah, it's not a whole lot different than joining the gym and sending your kids to private school or something like this, right? However, if we dig deeper and reframe the way we understand our anthropology, what does it fundamentally mean to be human? Well, if we belong to God, if that is our fundamental being, the experience of living in this world means that you belong to someone else, and that person loves you and is God. That radically changes things. So, for example, that steel worker, his dignity doesn't actually come from his work. It's good to work. But his dignity as a human being doesn't come from that. Although society might tell him so, it's a lie. Fundamentally, it comes from his being, belonging to God.
Alan Noble's with us. I'm holding in my hands his brand new book called You Are Not Your Own, Belonging to God in an Inhuman World. For those of you who are watching along online, we're streaming live on YouTube at The Word Pittsburgh. You can see Alan's book here in my hand. You Are Not Your Own. So, after you get through describing the problem, Alan, the hope is, of course, you're going to give us a 5-step plan in the last chapter.
Go for it, Alan.
That is
Please.
just going to lay it out for us.
Please,
and we're going to feel fixed and ready to go. Apparently, I keep looking in the book. I don't see that.
There's
Alan.
no 5-step plan?
It got edited out. So I had a great plan, but editing floor. Yeah, this is one of the challenging parts of the book is that I don't want to lie to people. And if the problem is as deep and systemic as I say, and I do believe that it is, then there isn't a plan to reclaim, our culture or save America or, fix the West or anything like this, right?
Yeah.
There are things that we can do and we are commanded to do in our sphere of influence, actions that we can take locally and among people that we can interact with that will make a difference, whether that's through voting, through the way we buy things, the way we talk to people, lots of actions that matter a great deal. But our hope is not that we can reclaim, that we can fix the entire system. Christ can do that, right? God is redeeming all things. If he wants to, completely reboot Western civilization, like he saved all of Nineveh, he can do that. He can do that. He has the power to do that. But I think that if we approach this issue with the posture of here's the steps we need to solve everything, I think what's going to happen is we're going to become delusional and abusive. Eventually, what will happen is we're going to feel like anyone who isn't on board with our agenda is getting in the way. So the real hope is in Christ. And that's not a quietism. So I'm not saying just sit back and let the world burn. No, you have to act. But you act in hope that God is redeeming all things, not you.
So it's not up to us to, as you write at the end, rebuild the city, right? It's actually God's task. Not that, again, we're not involved in it, but it's really different thinking that you have signed on for a greater mission that you're not completely in control of.
Or we've been sold something.
Or that I have to do this or the whole world's going to collapse.
And that's our default, right? I mean, if you think about across the political spectrum, our default is we want to hear somebody who has a plan, an agenda, a strategy for fixing our culture, for making our society, flourish. And those things aren't bad to aspire to, but I think it's important to recognize the scope of the problem and instead recognize that God is the one that changes things. Because, if just deeply embedded in our society, we have an assumption that we are our own and belong to ourselves, you and I and all your listeners can come to accept that is a lie, that actually we belong, body and soul and life and in death, to a faithful Savior, Jesus Christ, and we can push back against that lie as we experience it in culture. But fundamentally, society's still going to treat us as radically autonomous, and we're still going to have to bear that burden and live with it. Which is not easy. It's hard.
I like it.
It's hard, but it really, the value of hope really can't be valued. It really can transform anything.
Yes, yeah. And so I talk in the book, I talk about Eliot's concept from the four quartets of waiting without hope, by which I think he means that even as Christians, sometimes when we hope, we have a very specific thing that we have in mind. So my hope is for this politician to get into office, and then everything's going to be fixed. Or my hope is for the Supreme Court to overturn this, and then everything will be better.
Right.
It's not wrong to desire those things, but there's a way in which that we can put ourselves in God's place by saying, "This is God. This is how you're going to fix everything. This is your agenda. I'm confident this is how you're going to fix everything." And then when it doesn't happen, we feel like, where's God? How could he allow this to happen? And so as Christians, we have to learn to wait. We have to learn to be patient because God is working his redemption. We need to be faithful where we are. And the killer thing is, there are things that we could be doing in our lives right now to better love our neighbors. And it's easier for us to have an obsession about some political agenda than it is to serve where we are right now.
Amen to that.
That's so true. Alan Noble, the brand new book, You Are Not Your Own, Belonging to God in an Inhuman World. Alan, you've written a real thing here. Really appreciate it so much, and appreciate you too.
Thank you.
makes sense.
Does what make sense?
Aspirin.
Yep.
What if we didn't even talk about it? You just
Oh, yeah. Aspirin
Already
makes, it makes
decided.
perfect sense. And I'll tell you why.
okay. I can't wait to hear. Is this for heart health?
No. Just for general, you get your Advil,
Tylenol.
your Aleve,
Yeah.
Tylenol.
Your
They all
Motrin.
have their place. Everything does.
Do they have their
I
place?
think so, yeah. The Advil, of course, is for your back.
Is it?
Yeah,
It's
for
an
me.
anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
Okay.
The ibuprofen or the Aleve, the like 500 milligrams of that, sort of like the long haul thing.
Right.
There is something that I believe is like homeopathic, I might say, about the essence of what aspirin does.
Okay. What does it?
There's just something that you can't replicate in an Advil or anything else that's.
You don't mean that like the blood clotting thing. You mean or the
No.
anti-blood clotting thing. You're saying
Aspirin
it's,
has its place in its pain relieving efforts.
Really?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
And I would say this: if you are yourself someone who imbibes, and you hit a few aspirin
Yeah.
in a glass of water, Advil's not going to do that for you. It's just not. I'm just saying.
interesting thought.
Everything's got its place. Aspirin, you may consider it an antique. It's a stalwart.
Wow. Because I was going to say, John, it didn't make sense.
Wrong.
I was going to say that, the panoply of pain relief options that we have over the counter, that for the minor malady, you could choose your acetaminophen, you could choose your ibuprofen, and do you
Failure.
really need the aspirin?
Failure. Wrong thinking.
I don't know, John. I don't think I've had an aspirin since I was about 6.
You're missing out.
Okay. I like the taste of the St. Joseph's baby aspirin, that
Taste.
little orange taste.
Yeah.
That chalky thing. I liked it,
Okay.
but I haven't had it since. I'm not sure it does make sense.
I'm pro aspirin. Does this make sense? The pencil. Unless you're 11 and under, you don't need a pencil. Or if you're working in the trades, you're a carpenter or someone you need other than that, the pencil is wasted. What is the use of the point breaks? It smudges. It's not exact by any stretch.
Smells good.
I'm not in it for the aesthetic. I'm just talking about the day-to-day usage, the quality and nature of writing. Something that's legible.
What about that feeling you get with the lead on the paper? You don't like that?
No. The pencil makes no sense at all.
I agree with you, John.
God bless you.
I was giving you a hard time, but I can't really because I don't feel like we really need pencils anymore, especially because I have an erasable pen in my hand.
All right. Take 2 aspirin. See you in the morning. We live in some strange days, do we not?
You think that like all the weird stuff happens, in the street or on social media, and then you see a video of what goes on in a church, and you think, okay, so it's not just all out there. Weird stuff happens everywhere.
Rod Dreher is back with us. Rod is an author of several books, which we love. I think he's probably best known for the Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation.
My favorite is How Dante Can Save Your Life.
My wife's favorite is...
Ruthie Lemming.
Yeah. Rod, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm always glad to be your weird correspondent down here in South Louisiana, John.
Okay,
I'm glad you take that mantle, Rod.
Okay, so Rod, in the past, we have talked about how by us Christians trying to portray to the world that Christianity isn't weird, that we're doing ourselves and it a disservice, because Christianity is weird. There are a lot of things that we believe that are unusual.
Yes, but let's be unusual for the right reasons, not like what happened in San Antonio this weekend. Did you all see that from
Yes.
John Hagee's church?
Yep.
Yeah, please
Okay.
wait.
So for people who have not seen, talk about the video that we watched today.
Sure. They had some sort of political rally at the church.
It wasn't during the
featured
service?
I don't know if it was during a service or not, but it was definitely inside the church. And I'm hesitate to say it was within the service because I don't know. But in any case, the fact that it was held in a church is disturbing enough. There were two things that made people, their eyebrows go up from that conference. One was, at one point, there was a guy on stage leading the congregation in chanting, "Let's go, Brandon." Now, as we know, that is a euphemism for a more vulgar phrase meant to attack Joe Biden. Now, look, I wouldn't say that anyway. It's a trashy thing to say, but if it emerges at a football game, okay, I get it. But in a church, come on. I can't see any circumstances under which that would be appropriate. But that's what happened at this church.
Yeah.
The second thing is, go ahead.
No, Rod, I just got to say, I saw it too. I was shocked. I could not believe it was inside a church where, people are praying. There is worship. There is communion. There is confession. I mean, where Christ is lifted up, and all of a sudden it becomes like, holy smokes, so incredibly
I know.
rude.
It's like they're turning church into a political cult, and they don't have any standards by which to tell people, wait, don't bring that filthy language into a church.
Holy.
I know. And then comes General Michael Flynn, the former, briefly the National Security Advisor to President Trump. He's a real activist in the post-Trump period. He's giving a speech from the stage. He says that we need one religion in this country. And I'm listening to him say that. I'm like, wait a minute, don't you understand that this country was founded by religious dissidents for the sake of religious liberty, so we wouldn't have the government telling us what our religion should be? I mean, and then he goes on, John and Kathy, to say that America was prophesied in the Gospel of Matthew. And I'm just shaking my head thinking, wait a minute, America is not the biblical Israel. We're a great country. We're a country that has been blessed by God. I love my country, but
Amen.
This is idolatry.
Right. I don't get it. I mean, is it just ignorance? I guess is my question, especially when Michael Flynn is talking about that we should have one national religion. I mean,
who would say that? Doesn't make any
you have to
sense.
be reading incredibly narrowly to not realize what it looks like when there's a national religion in other places throughout all of world history.
Right, and I have been arguing on my side. Your listeners may not realize that I'm an Orthodox Christian, but I've been arguing with Catholic integralists. These are intellectual Catholics who believe the same thing as Michael Flynn, but they want the one religion in America to be Catholicism. The weird thing about people like Michael Flynn and like the integralists is they always think they're going to be the ones on top telling other people what to do. What they don't realize is that here in America today, sadly, we're de-Christianizing quickly, and I'm afraid that the religion that's going to be on top of all of us will be wokeness.
Right.
And we need to be able to stand behind the First Amendment to defend religious liberty, because that's the only way we're going to be able to protect ourselves and our institutions.
Okay, so then if it's one religion, it's okay if it's your religion, but if it's not, then everything else is a mess.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I understand where he's coming from, that it would make for a more cohesive and stable society if we all shared the same religion. But that's not America. That's not how we have ever been. The Catholics were oppressed by Protestants in the 19th century who didn't want them, and now there are some Catholics who want to oppress Protestants. I think we ought to stick with the way the country was founded, on religious liberty.
Rod Dreher is the senior editor at The American Conservative. His latest book is Live Not by Lies, a manual for Christian dissidents. All right, based on the tremendous research you did for Live Not by Lies, Rod, and all of your travels over there, which John and I were super jealous of.
Loved it.
If I saw one more picture of borscht, it's really making me mad after a little bit of time.
I mean, I'm texting you. Where are you? I'm in Vienna.
Yes,
Fabulous,
stop
Rod.
it.
Fabulous.
Fine. But anyway, Rod, you heard story after story of what it's like to live in an authoritarian environment. And so now we've got people in America who are advocating for just that sort of thing. And if only, they're saying, if only we could have that.
Yeah, it's like if only we would get the ring of power, we would use it for good.
Yep.
And I just don't think that is in the cards with human nature. It's a difficult thing because I see what is happening from the left, especially in Europe right now. The nation of Hungary is under intense assault by the European Union because it follows a more traditional Christian line on the definition of marriage, and in Hungary they passed a law to keep LGBT propaganda away from children, and Europe is coming down hard on them. I think that we have to be willing and able to resist what the left is doing on that front, but we're no better if we behave as they do to people who don't agree with us.
So, Ron, how then do we, as believers, look at the world and inform the world by our thoughts, our words, our actions to see the holiness of the world, right? Because the world is holy. The breath that I'm taking right now, there is holiness within that. But somehow as believers, we've just avoided all that. We've sort of gone beyond that. We've made politics over everything, and we've taken out the holiness of where we are.
Thank you for asking that question. You're talking about my next book. I noticed that here in the world today, we see so many young people leaving Christianity. But the interesting thing is they're not embracing atheism. I think they are still open to the gospel message. But we have got to somehow confront them with the awe of Jesus Christ, with the awe of beauty that the world God made, and with holiness in individuals. So I'm going to try to focus on that.
Now, that's interesting. So I listened to a podcast interview that you did with Mike Cosper. I don't know when that was, maybe a year or so ago. And you talked about how persuasive beauty was to you in your own spiritual maturity. And I really appreciated that. And I've thought that myself, but I think you said it so well that there was a time in your life when you felt like your intellectual grasp on the faith was what was quote unquote going to save you. I don't think I would say that literally, but you felt like that was extremely important. And then you went through a life change, and now being an Orthodox believer, that experiential worship,
The mystery.
yeah, all of that.
Right.
Explain it a little bit. Explain where that evolution in your life.
Well, I always thought when I was a young man and I came to Christ, I thought that if I had the intellectual arguments for my form of Christianity, Roman Catholicism, if I had those arguments clear in my head, my faith would be able to withstand anything. But it wasn't true. And in the crisis after I lost my Catholic faith, I went back to think about what drew me to Christ in the first place as a young man. First of all, it was beauty. It was about being confronted with the awe of Christ in a European cathedral. There was nothing in my background growing up in South Louisiana in the late 20th century that prepared me for that kind of beauty. And I immediately wanted to know the God that had inspired men whose names are lost to history to build such a temple to his honor. And then later, after I wrestled with that for 6 years, I met a holy man, an elderly Catholic priest who had lost his faith as a young man, but who experienced 2 miracles and came back to the faith. And he wept as he told me what had happened to him. And I realized then I have to know this Jesus. I have to give my life to this Christ. And when I was rebuilding my own faith, I realized that these are the things that first brought me to Christ, and these are the things that I think will appeal to young people who aren't interested in arguments, but you can't argue with awe. Right. So
Okay.
I will.
Yeah, so let me interrupt you for just a minute, Rod. When you mentioned that older priest who you talked to, and you said he wept when he was recounting those miracles hadn't happened recently in his life.
No, they had happened 50 years earlier.
But
even
they
60
brought him to
years
tears
earlier.
still 50 years after that time.
Yeah, and it was a classic story. That I could not prove that what this man experienced was real, but the fact that he changed his life completely and became a priest, and the fact that he was so moved over 50 years since these happened, he was so moved that he cried about it. That told me that he had met the living Christ.
Mm-hmm. But then go back to the very beginning of our conversation, Rod. People who were in John Hagee's church over the weekend and were chanting, "Let's go, Brandon," they aren't necessarily going to remember that decades from now and go, "That was an awe-inspiring moment in my life. I saw the majesty of Christ there."
Yeah.
Oh, man, you really got it, John. That's just it. And think about what their children, what people outside the church are going to think. Since COVID started at my little Orthodox parish here in Baton Rouge, we have had an astonishing number of young people show up wanting to worship with us. And they all say the same thing. We came because we're looking for something real. That means they are so fed up with church being politicized either to the left or the right that they want to come someplace and worship where Jesus Christ is exalted and politics is left on the front doorstep.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Okay. So, Rod, you've got this most recent book, "Live Not by Lies," and you're working on a new thing. How do you do that? Do you just you decide to tie a bow around your last work? It gets published, and then you're just off onto a new tangent.
Sounds so easy, Rod.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'll have to come back on to talk about this longer story about this new book. But it started when a man came up to me in 2018 in Italy after I gave a Benedict option talk. And he said, "Sir, I'm an artist." His English wasn't good. And I was praying in my studio this afternoon, and the Holy Spirit told me to come hear the American talk tonight and to give you this. He gave me this image, an engraving he did of a medieval saint I had never heard of. And once I started digging in that, a mystery presented itself. And it's ending up with me writing a book about how the Lord speaks to us through these signs and wonders and miracles.
Fabulous.
I cannot wait to talk to you about that. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. And I even wrote to the man, the artist. I said, "You don't know this, sir, but you really changed my life, the doors you opened." And he wrote back and said, "I was just being faithful to what the Holy Spirit said." And he's agreed to let us use the image he gave me on the cover of the book if the publisher wants to.
Fabulous.
But I think people need this in the worst way now. We need to be reminded about that initial awe that brought almost all of us to Christ. And it's just gotten so occluded by passions over politics and culture war. And what I want to do is reach young people and let them know that this is what Christianity is all about, not politics.
Rod, I couldn't agree more.
I'm on your
Thank you
side
so
100%,
very, very
man.
much. Rod Dreher, Live Not by Lies, the Benedict option, other fine things as well. Look for Rod online. Easy to find. Rod, thank you so much. Great pleasure.
Take care, guys.
Take
Rod
care, Rod.
Dreher.
If you have more borscht,
DREHER.
keep it to yourself. I mean, I can't bear much more.
That's so good. That is
Isn't
so
it?
good.
It's so good.
I mean, holiness, not the borscht.
I bet the borscht is pretty good, too. Each Friday on the ride home, we make our picks for Pittsburgh hometown teams over the weekend.
Homers.
And we did 2 games over the weekend, over this past Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I don't need to tell you how badly that panned out.
For no one.
One panned out well for me.
Oh, that.
But I am trailing right now. Overall, Christy's leading this pack. John, and then I'm pulling up the caboose. Why are you both laughing?
Because she knows it. Didn't you hear it?
No.
See, that's the only child in you.
Yeah.
Oh, that little tisk with my 7 brothers and sisters, that could kill you. Seriously.
Because it conveyed so much.
As soon as I did it, Chrissy, she laughed. She knew.
So Pens and Sens on Saturday night. That happened at 7:00.
Yeah.
And John, you said that the Pens would win 4-1.
I did.
Christy, you thought that the Pens would win 3-2. But I thought the Pens would lose. I thought the Sens would win 2-1. And sadly, it was 6-3. So you
Pens lost.
get a lot of nothing out of that.
But you get something.
But I did get something. I
Well,
get
you
a
said 2-1.
point out of that. Yeah.
All right.
I get a point
6-3,
out of that.
Really.
And then we move on to yesterday's game where none of us predicted a tie because who would do that?
Against the 0-8
Who
Detroit
would
Lions.
think that there would be a tie in the NFL, first off, and certainly not against the Detroit Lions, the hapless Lions.
Right. Without Ben.
Right.
I mean, how about Ben? Getting the jab, and now he gets COVID.
We
Yeah.
didn't know
Aaron
Ben
Ro-
was going to be out at the time.
We
though.
did not
No,
know.
we
Right,
didn't.
right.
We did. But would we still have predicted a tie? No.
Who can predict
Christy thought it would be 29-27. John, you thought it'd be 24-10. I thought it'd be 19-17. So none of us picked the winner, but I did come closest at
Doesn't matter.
19-17.
Oh.
The score was 16-16.
It doesn't matter. You still were wrong. I came closest to being wrong.
I came
faint
closest to
praise.
being right.
Right. Penn State also lost, in case you're keeping score at home.
No, but we're not because we don't
I
care about
am,
them.
because I love them both.
Because you can't.
You can, too.
Philanderer.
Have a great night. Could we